we've got this video from Veritasium, These Illusions Fool Almost Everyone, and it is a video about audio illusions. And so I thought it might be fun to watch this video and react to it. Basically add my perspective as someone who I think has pretty good ears as an audio engineer and music producer, and see how we do on some of these illusions. I watched a little bit of it before this, which is why I thought that it would be maybe a fun idea to do a video on. Yeah, let's go ahead and react to some audio illusions.
I want you to listen to these two sounds and decide which is higher. So this is sound A, and this is sound B. Okay.
Sound A is a single clean tone, like a sine wave, and then sound B is a chord, so there's multiple pitches in there. I'm not sure if maybe the lowest sound in sound B is lower than sound A, but there's definitely multiple pitches in sound B, some of which are higher pitched than in sound A.
Okay, so to me, sound A is clearly higher, but that's strange because sound A was just a 100 hertz sine wave. Sound B had that same 100 hertz frequency, but also 150 hertz and 200 hertz. So we added higher frequencies, but the sound was lower.
So when you double frequencies, you get a full octave. So when you have a 100 hertz, 150 hertz, and a 200 hertz sine wave, you are playing 2 octaves on the same pitch with the perfect fifth in the middle. So it's just a sort of very whole tone sound.
How does that work? I think there's this idea that what our ears do is simply detect the frequency of vibrations in our environment that are between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz.
So 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz is commonly cited as the range of human hearing, but those actually tend to be sort of the extremes of human hearing and also healthy human hearing. Basically anyone that's ever ridden a subway or heard a car horn very loudly probably has significantly reduced from that 20,000 hertz threshold on the high end. And me personally, for example, my low end hearing starts to cut off pretty aggressively around 60 hertz.
There is so much more to hearing than that. And in this video, we're gonna go through a series of audio illusions that illustrate how our sense of hearing actually works.
Something I didn't realize about organs is that they were meant to sound like many different instruments playing together. For each instrument, there are a series of pipes in the organ which play all the different notes for that instrument. When two pipes of the same length vibrate, they both play the same note. That's because they're both producing the same fundamental frequency, that is, the lowest and usually highest amplitude vibration they produce. But if the pipes are made of different materials, they will sound different. And that's because each one produces a distinct set of higher frequencies called overtones. They're not as loud as the fundamental, and we don't hear them as distinct tones, but they affect the quality of the sound, called timbre. It's how you can tell apart a trumpet from, say, a flute.
So to go back to that very first example in the beginning with the sine wave. So sine wave is just the fundamental. It's the most basic wave shape. There's other basic wave shapes such as saw waves, square waves, pulses, etc. But what gives the actual tone and the timbre to an instrument, like he's saying, is all those beautiful different overtones. And there's actually lots of different ways that you can add overtones and add texture to sound using tools like saturators, comb filters. All of these different kinds of distortion are basically adding these overtones, which changes what a sound sounds like.
For a lot of instruments, the most common overtones are integer multiples of the fundamental frequency. These are known as harmonics.
If this was your fundamental note, the notes that you're going to be hearing with it would be so all of those notes are within that fundamental note.
So when he says they're all in the fundamental note, he's basically playing out the different scale degrees to which these overtones naturally occur when you're playing a physical acoustic instrument. An interesting way to demonstrate this, actually, on a guitar, you can play an open string. You can also play these kind of touch harmonics. So exactly halfway down the string is the 12th fret, the octave, and you can create a node by doing a tap harmonic. And you can also play these on other frets as well, not just in the middle. And those are the different overtones on the fundamental that he mentioned.
The Sydney Town Hall pipe organ is one of only 2 in the world that has a 64-foot long pipe.
It's actually...
Like, that's a really big chunk of wood right here.
Oh, yeah.
Georg Joseph Vogler was a popular organist. He wanted to tour the continent, but that would require building a compact, portable organ that he could take with him on the road. Now, he obviously couldn't haul around the huge 32-foot pipe required to produce 16 hertz. So how could he still create the low frequencies that make the organ so powerful? Well, Vogler realized that if he played the harmonics of 16 hertz using shorter pipes, your brain would hear this missing fundamental.
The fifth is that sort of most common fundamental, which you're going to hear to get the low sound.
It's so funny because you add it and I do not hear it going up. You're playing a fifth above.
Yes.
But I'm hearing it go down.
With the 2 sounds I played at the beginning, the first was a pure 100 hertz. But the second sound was made up of the harmonics of 50 hertz. So you actually heard this fundamental frequency even though it wasn't there.
So you can obviously kind of train your ears to hear what's actually there and not sort of these illusions, and that comes with lots of time and sort of thinking like more of an engineer rather than just sort of passively listening to things. However, this phenomena is something that we have to very actively think about in a time where most people are listening to music on little tiny phone speakers. A very important consideration during mixing is making sure that the bass frequencies and the kick drum and the bass can actually be heard on these little tiny speakers. Low frequencies are actually very difficult to produce using small speakers. It's physically impossible. So, I've got these big 10-inch Cali studio monitors, and those can play down to the very low frequencies, but the little speakers in my phone cannot. And so a lot of times we are adding saturation and distortion effects to our bass, to our kick, to add these harmonics so that these lower frequencies can have the illusion of sounding big and punchy and bassy on smaller speaker systems. So that's a very important consideration in modern mixing that actually has a historical context all the way back to vinyl, where a lot of these low pitches couldn't actually physically be carved into the grooves of the record without the needle skipping. So you would need to basically EQ out a lot of this really low stuff and basically make it back up by distorting the bass and adding these overtones so that you can get the illusion of hearing that low bass.
That's how higher frequencies together can sound lower than low frequencies, if they are harmonics of a low fundamental. Now, this might not be as weird as it seems. If you look at the waveform of the harmonics, you find that adding the higher frequencies changes the period of the sound. It makes the period longer, so that it's actually the same as the missing fundamental. In Super Mario 64, there's a staircase that seems to go on forever. Now, listen carefully to the music. The scale sounds like it keeps going up and up and up, just like the endless staircase. This is the shepherd tone illusion, and here's a shepherd glissando on its own. The trick is a shepherd tone isn't just one note. There are multiple frequencies being played, all separated by octaves. All of these frequencies are increasing, but as they do, their volumes change. So the high notes get quieter and the low notes get louder. High notes soon fade out and new low notes are faded in. This gives the illusion of an ever-rising pitch.
Shepherd tones can also evoke emotional or physical responses in some listeners.
A 2016 study found that after listening to shepherd tones, participants reported feeling nervous, anxious, and disturbed.
So shepherd tones are really famous, famously used in horror movies, I think, as they're about to get into. There's a very deep history of synthesis for making sound effects and soundtracks for horror movies by basically playing around with these fundamentals and ways that don't play cleanly, not using the same overtones that belong to a fundamental, can add really harsh dissonance to sounds that makes us kind of intuitively uncomfortable in a way that doesn't kind of distract from the movie.
Perhaps that's why, during an intense bombing scene in the film Dunkirk, Shepard tones feature in the accompanying score.
Hopefully this won't make you uneasy, but I want you to try to figure out which well-known tune this is. All of the notes have been kept the same, but they've been mixed up into different octaves. Did you recognize the song? Well, here is the unscrambled melody.
Charlie Puth, did you get that one?
But now that you've heard that, can you follow the scrambled version? To me, it's fascinating how the second time I heard the scrambled melody, the tune seemed obvious, which is very different from how it sounded the first time. Our brains can find patterns in random sounds, too. This is the phantom word illusion, created by Dr. Diana Deutsch.
Listen to this audio and try to figure out which words are being said. You can put what you heard in the comments.
It's playing each word in each ear at different pitches. So you can hear either word depending on which word you're primed with. Personally, I find it so distracting that I can't hear either word.
When one speaker plays a word, the second speaker plays a different word at the same time. According to Dr. Deutsch, because the signals are mixed in the air before they reach your ears, you're given a pile of sounds to choose from, so you can create words in your mind.
A lot of what we hear depends not on the frequencies of sound, but on how our brains process them. Dr. Deutsch noticed that when she played this illusion near exam week, students reported hearing words like no brain, I'm tired, or no time. And we can actually prime the brain to hear what we want it to hear. For
Priming.
example, using text. Take the case
Primals.
of this crowd chanting.
That is embarrassing! That is embarrassing! That is embarrassing! That is embarrassing!
You're primed to hear the lyrics you see. So while you
It's important to remember how much information you're constantly perceiving. I'm seeing all sorts of lights and cameras and computer and cats and everything.
6 consoles, 10 computers, bunch of fucking wires.
I'm also hearing the video. I'm also smelling the smell of the room. I'm tasting the taste of the inside of my mouth. There's so much information being processed in extremely high resolution by your senses. Your brain has to do a lot of subconscious work to summarize all of this into a conscious experience that isn't deafening and unfathomable, like Gojo's unlimited void. And so some of the ways that your brain simplifies these things is by using shortcuts based on an expectation from information that the brain has already received. And so that's basically how priming works. Your brain is trying to use shortcuts to make sense of complicated information.
What am I saying in this clip? Bear, bear, bear.
Are you talking to me?
If you heard the word bear, that's because that's what I was saying. But
Also, you were primed because you're watching Bear, Bear, Bear.
what am I saying in this clip? Bear, bear, bear. Now I bet you heard fair. But if you
I heard
play
there
back
with
both
a
those
V.
clips without looking, you'll find it's the exact same audio. All we changed was the mouth movement. And I can prove it to you by playing those two clips at the same time, and what you hear will change depending on which clip you focus on. Bear, 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 bear.
Priming illusions are very freaky. I don't know how to music-explain that one.
So researchers started looking into the so-called cocktail party effect, because this problem resembled focusing on a single voice in a noisy room. In this recording, try to find the voice talking about a flight in this crowd.
I don't know if I have ADHD or what, but I struggle immensely with picking out audio in crowds like this. And I've always had a lot of difficulty kind of holding conversations in very loud, confusing, dense, sort of crowded parties and things like that.
I find that really hard.
I couldn't find
but
anything.
If you hear the voice first, then the rest of the conversation is easier to follow.
I still lose her immediately. That didn't really help me.
This is much easier because you can predict what words will come next based on context and language structure.
But how do we actually locate the source of a sound? Well, I'm gonna put on this blindfold and ask my wife to walk around me and clap in different locations, and I am going to try to point to the location of the sound.
There's a mini game in AIM Labs, which is the video game for making you better at other video games, called Audio Perception. And a couple of years ago, I hit rank 1 in audio perception on AIM Lab. The way that it works, it's all stereo panning. You hear a sound slightly louder in one ear than the other, and your brain decides, okay, based on how much louder or how much quieter, it's either in front or behind me, a certain amount left or right. And you can tell what's behind you because it's slightly lower pitched, lower EQ, a little bit of a high cut EQ, because the sound is going through the back of your ear, so it's slightly filtered and some of those high frequencies are filtered out.
Normally, you can pinpoint a sound to within a degree or two. And there are actually 4 different cues that help me identify the location of the sound.
How was it?
The first is volume. A sound on my right will be louder in my right ear. My head sort of casts a sound shadow over my left ear. And the second cue is that this shadow attenuates higher frequencies more than low frequencies. It's kind of like when your neighbor is having a party. You can't really hear the high frequencies, like the lyrics, but you can hear the bass, because low frequencies are less attenuated by distance and obstacles. The third is time delay. It takes a sound half a millisecond to cross your head, so sound will usually arrive at one ear before the other.
I'm surprised the delay is that much more significant than the volume difference. I'm not sure I can perceive the delay.
Left. And then on your right. Now, as the delay between those 2 beeps is shortened, it's less of an echo and more just one sound that's really on your left.
So I guess it's the same thing. When the delay is so short like that, the perception of the delay is increase in volume as the waves are additive.
Humans typically have symmetric ears, but their shapes are important.
This is where the outer part of your ear comes in. I mean, what?
Chat, leave a comment. Do you have a connected lobe like me, or a disconnected lobe like Veritasium?
Normally just referred to as the ear. Technically, this is called the pinna. Depending on the location and the frequency of sound, it will bounce.
Also, do your earlobes line up with your nipples? Why is no one talking about this?
And over the course of our lives, our brains learn the way different frequencies reflect off our ears, and we use that information to identify the source of the sound.
Next, you're gonna tell me that people don't see the same colors.
Now, every person has a unique pinna shape. So what if our ears changed?
In a 1998 study, researchers placed small molds into the ears of a group of participants, changing the shape of their pinnas. Before the study, they were fairly good at locating sounds, but after changing their pinna shape, they were downright terrible. Over a series of days and weeks with their new pinnas, the participants all adjusted and became better at locating sound. So it is something your brain can adapt to. Thankfully, after the molds were removed, participants had no trouble reverting back to their original ears.
I mean, that just goes to show that the brain is very plastic and adaptable, and you can learn to hear differently. And that's why it's important to practice ear training as a musician, producer, audio engineer.
In reality, the companies like Apple and Sony actually scan your ears to create personalized spatial audio.
Is that how that works?
And for a long time,
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
But then, during World War I, locating bombing planes on approach was of central importance. So armies developed special equipment called sound mirrors to amplify sound. In Britain, sound mirror stations coordinated together.
Those are some cool pictures. I might have to investigate some of those for some album covers.
When two pipes are slightly out of tune, there's this pulsing effect to the sound. You can hear that in a more pronounced way if I play pure tones. Here is a pure 261 Hz sine wave and a pure 263 Hz sine wave. When both of these tones play, those compression and refraction waves interfere with each other. Sometimes the peaks line up to produce a louder sound, and when a peak lines up with a trough, they cancel out. Because these frequencies are separated by 2 Hz, you hear 2 louder pulses every second. This is known as beating. Now the beats are really clear.
So you can get really creative with beating and phase and EQing overtones, like we discussed in the beginning of the video, as well as tools like formant shaping and formant shifting to create the sound of different kind of vowels and consonants. And that's used a lot in bass music to create like the wub-wubs and dubstep and other bass genres by doing lots of creative formant shaping and filtering on various types of bass waves, usually saws.
But what happens if a 261 Hz tone is played in one ear and a 263 Hz tone is played in the other?
Yeah, the two pitches don't interact, so there's no
the
beating
tones
effect.
Never had a chance to interact, but you can still hear some subtle beating. Your brain is firing at a rate corresponding to the phase difference, causing the beat perception. When your brain mixes these frequencies together, it's called binaural beats. And maybe you've already heard of binaural beats, as a quick search of YouTube shows that some people claim they can improve focus or memory. But a 2023 review...
It's all famously not doing that. There's a very good video by Adam Neely about binaural beats.
Was inconclusive and emphasized the need for more standardized testing methods.
It doesn't do anything.
Audio illusions show us where our perception goes wrong, but the system as a whole is pretty good at getting to the truth.
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting. Hopefully I was able to add some unique perspective as a musician who's done a lot of ear training. Let me know what you thought of this kind of React video. Let me know if you'd be interested in seeing more kind of music producer reacts type content, or if you'd be interested in a video on ways that you can train your ears to be able to better identifying exactly what it is that you are hearing, whether something is a low tone or a chord designed to create the illusion of an even lower tone. Yeah, let me know in the comments, hit the like button. I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, day, night, whenever you may be watching this, and I'll see you next time.